Well guys, the Pathfinder playtest is rapidly coming to a close. We still got, 8 odd months before things are completed, which is a lot of time, but we're already seeing official 2nd edition content, which I'm very stoked for. But I realize, as I get ready to make this episode of min-maxing for fun and profit, there's one very glaring area of optimized play that we just haven't really touched on: the art of control magic. And so this episode of min-maxing for fun and profit is going to take a look at all of those spells that we've loved for years of 3.5 and Pathfinder 1st edition that would rule the battlefield. See how they're looking now and see if, we can still be that save or suck spellcaster in Pathfinder 2nd edition. This has something for almost every casting class. So strap in, guys, and if you're liking what you're seeing, remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Requests go in the comments. Patronage cuts you to the front of the line. Hey, speaking of patronage, today, this episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit was brought to you in part by our newest $50 patron, Mr. Nick Cirillo. Nick actually has been with the channel for a while. He was one of my very first dollar patrons when things started picking up. And to be honest, I don't know if I have ever said this, so I'm going to say it now, and I'll also say it at the start of Wrath. We kind of owe that to Nick. It's pretty common for trolls to appear across the internet. It's pretty common for people to see something they don't like and then unsubscribe, tune out, etc., etc. But Nick is, I think, the only person in my entire career on YouTube ever, period, to offer constructive criticism. This was a long time ago in the Forgotten Race review video for, I believe it was the Angelkin Azimar. I don't remember exactly what was said, but at that time, I was just kind of a dude with a really crappy webcam mic running at this thing, trying to do what I loved. And through his advice, through his constructive criticism, now so many more people are here with us. Quality of content has improved, and truly, as someone who is basically a one-man army, both in real life and in terms of this YouTube channel, I cannot understate how much I appreciate that. So Nick, thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being a really big help to the channel. And guys, Nick will be playing Wrath of the Righteous with us. That starts Saturday, January 19th from 2 to 5 p.m. Central Time. We'll be streaming to Twitch. And hey, also, it's not too late. If you've thought about jumping at our bi-weekly game tier, Patreon's in the description. We'd love to have you. Now let's hit it, now that I'm done waxing poetic at you guys. Anywho, so if you don't know what I mean when I say save or suck, let me paint a picture for you. A long, long time ago, there was a spell called Hold Person. That and its larger, angrier cousin, Hold Monster, would cause the target, assuming said target failed its save, to take no actions, to be helpless, and basically, suck for the duration of that combat. Now granted, you could try to save against it every round, but an optimized wizard who had a really high save, or that fey-blooded kitsune that we all know and love, that was really amazing actually, had a really, really difficult save. And when you combo that with someone with, say, the Throat Slicer feat, or even just some dude who's okay with using his full round action to coup de grace you, it made combats fast, it made combats trivial, and to be honest, it's kind of an unfun playstyle. Now, granted, I'm a huge advocate of it, because truthfully, it's the best. It is the most efficient way, be it Hold Person, the Slumber Hex, you name it. Getting someone to helpless, usually via magic, then coup de grace, is just the fastest way to remove somebody from the battlefield, to get through the combat, to take no damage while they are taking damage, but it's not fun. One of my best friends, who will remain unnamed, had the GM for a witch for a long time, and you could see the frustration on his face every time the witch would roll up and Misfortune Slumber. The encounters were trivial because of that class. And that's why I target witches pretty aggressively when I GM for them. Fair warning if you ever play a witch for me, because you have that power. Players will get the same way. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, but when you do, it's just no fun. They get a round of combat and then they've died. The playtest is looking to change that, and I think it's changed it in a pretty effective way. The spells remain powerful. And basically we're just talking about the staple spells. There may be some new spells that I'm not aware of that have slipped under the radar. If you know them, the comments is where they go. I need to build casters, you know. But by and large, every spell that was notorious for doing this has been, I guess to say it one way, nerfed. But to say it another way, has been balanced out in such a way that the really bad thing only happens, usually, if the opponent critically fails their save. A failure will do something bad. A failure will do something that you have to usually spend actions to get around, or in general are just real inconvenienced by, which leads me to believe that no longer does the save or suck meta exist. Now it's more of a save or waste meta. We have 3 actions in combat, pending any other fanciness that we might get, and losing any one of those 3 actions is huge. That means you might not be able to move as far. That means you might not be able to cast a 2-action spell and also get out of the way of the barbarian who's in your dome, racking your dome with his gigantic scary weapon. It might mean that somebody can't escape. The options are pretty endless, which makes combat more modal while still being, you know, fun for everyone and effective for people who choose to build this way. So let's just dive right into these spells, shall we? Starting with that elephant in the room. Used to be called Hold Person / Hold Monster, now it's Paralyze. Paralyze at spell level 3, passed out to the Arcane and Occult caster, has 4 effects on the end of a will save. On a critical success, the target is unaffected. A regular success, the target is slowed for a round. Paralyzed for a round on a failure. Critical failure, the target is paralyzed for 4 rounds, able to attempt the save at the start of each turn to reduce that duration by a round, or completely if they critically succeed. Heightening this lets us target non-humanoids, eventually up to 10 humanoids, then up to 10 non-humanoids. Now, really, I want to say that that spell has been basically replaced. Is that good? Yeah, sure. The slowed condition is really powerful. It's probably the scariest condition in the save or waste beta, but there is no coup de grace mechanic at this time. Paralyzed makes you flat-footed and unable to act, except to recall knowledge or use just your brain, but you can't just walk up and stab someone to death. Is the condition still bad? Yes. What I think replaces the spell, honestly, at the same spell level and also available to the primal casters for 1 less action, slow. One thing I like a lot about both of these spells, and it's pretty critical to be looking for these as optimized casters, is the target is bolstered on a critical success. So if they crit pass, we can try again next round. That's amazing. But the ability to target up to 10 creatures is reached considerably faster at level 6 with slow, and slowed 1 or 2 oftentimes will be enough to shut off a lot of people's anything they're doing in combat, short of like a monster that just wants to try to strike once. Right, cantrips are 2 actions, a lot of the really fancy martial abilities like sudden charge, that's 2 actions. Can't do that if you're slowed too. Things that are slowed cannot ready actions and lose that amount of actions at the start of their turn, which is fair in a world of like, what if I want to cast this on my player? Hold Person will stop them, and then I coup de grace, and then no fun is had. Slow at least gives like a sense of, well, I can still do something, I can move, I can open a door, I can try to shoot with my bow, etc., while still basically taking the wind out of everyone's sail. And again, every class but divine-based sorcerers and clerics have access to it. And I suppose now this is as good a time as any to talk about the opposite of slowed, which is still probably one of the best spells in the game, though, again, a little reflavored and rebalanced for the playtest, haste. Everyone but the divine casters have access to it, same spell level, same amount of actions, and it passes out a single target this time, the quick condition, for 10 rounds, which oftentimes is an entire combat. You have to wait until 7th level to heighten this in such a way that you can target up to 5, which makes this a little less of a like major staple spell. But the fact that multiple casters have access to it means that it may be passed out a little faster, or like our druid can just cast it on themselves, our meleeed bard can cast it on themselves, etc. If nothing else, it was common in older editions for the caster to buff the marshal, and then there's that old analogy of, well, did the marshal kill the thing, or did the caster who buffed the marshal, because the marshal couldn't do it without the caster. It's the same idea. In a party with a lot of marshals, making the fighter quick 1 means a sudden charge and then 2 strikes. seems pretty effective to me. Again, rebalanced, but if we're trying to build that control caster that wins the battles, the god of the battlefield, as oftentimes I've seen it described, that's how you do it. Anyway, now we're just going to run down the list of all the spells in alphabetical order that once upon a time were staples, at least for that control caster, and see how they stack up now. First up, taking all 3 actions for the arcane and occult caster at spell level 5, classic, it's Black Tentacles. Black Tentacles in older editions, especially in games at lower point buys where encounters were like easier, could be a flat encounter ender. First edition's Black Tentacles made a 20-foot radius of things that would grab you, do damage, and prevent things from moving. In addition to a little bit of damage that was thrown around, if you can't move, you can't get to the caster, who then can pick you off at their leisure. In the playtest, though the duration has gone from 1 minute or until dismissed from a round per level, it's basically the same idea. Tentacles rise up and try to grapple each creature in a 20-foot burst adjacent to a flat surface, which again rolls against their fortitude DC. Any creature that you pass against is grabbed, and any creature that ends their turn there might get grabbed as well. Now, things can try to hack through the tentacles, whereas before they could not. But again, that seems to be just a pretty good combat finisher, just like it used to be. The grab condition makes somebody both immobile and flat-footed. It's a DC 5 flat check, or they lose manipulate, actions, activities, free actions, or reactions. So, you know, basically 100% what it used to be, except now it does more damage. From 1d6 plus 4, Black Tentacles now, as per an update, does 3d6 points of damage, which almost certainly will hit for more. And it does the same thing that it used to, but again, except for a pretty big damage increase, which goes to show that, again, the blaster casters are looking pretty good simultaneously. It helps the control caster, if maybe you only have them Black Tentacles for the round, at least have something to show for it, in the form of a tentacle that's wrapped around some dude's neck and snapped it. Fun! Now, we've talked about this a little bit already in past videos, but we're going to bring it up again, as, again, it's that good old control magic at low level play available again, and you're going to see a theme here to arcane and occult casters. Color Spray has received a pretty big buff that makes it a lot more playable for any control caster, because it's no longer limited by hit dice. Back in the day, Color Spray would become other things, and truly it does now as well. But the spell that we all took at first level and forgot about as we leveled up because it stopped being good, stays good for the entire campaign. For 2 actions at spell level 1, affecting a 15-foot cone, the bad guys make a will save. They're unaffected, again, not bolstered, can try again, only if they pass the save by 10 or more. A success dazzles them for a round, a failure blinds them for a round, then dazzles them for a round. The critical failure stuns for a round, then blinds for 4. This is basically the rogue's best friend. A rogue wizard multiclass that takes Color Spray is loving this, because all of these are going to do something that enables sneak attack. Stunned, of course, completely shuts somebody off because their body becomes unresponsive. Now that doesn't say it makes you flat-footed, but I'm gonna go ahead and assume if you can't move because your body's unresponsive, you can probably get shanked in the kidneys a little better, which, in addition to selling the control wizard's power as they level up, also promotes, again, that party synergy that made the god caster what they were. If the rogue got extra sneak attacks against the blinded thing, which caused the blinded thing to die, did the rogue kill it? Or did the control caster? I'm honestly always leaning towards, especially if for some reason the rogue couldn't get that flank off, the control caster. That's why they were so good before, and it seems to be just the same now. And on that note, while we're talking about spells that no longer have a hit dice limit, I actually wish I would have read the spells a little bit before we started Greenwich Colonies, because Mirrodin would have taken this one. Everyone but the primal casters have access to the Daze cantrip, which again has no limit to hit dice. It can function throughout the entire game. There is 0 effect on a critical success. On a success, the target is unaffected. On a failure, the target immediately becomes flat-footed. I'm in a party with 1, maybe 2 if Tiki comes back rogues. That's so good. Just snap and you're flat-footed for 2 actions on a cantrip, however often I want to use that. And on a critical failure, it's 1 round of slowed 1. It's kind of like my first slow spell. except for, again, you'll always have access to it after you've burned through resources. I don't see any problem with like a bard who has a shield going Daze, raise my shield over and over against a single target, because if you're regularly passing their saves, that's a pretty darn good stun lock. And again, there's no bolster there. There's no, oh, well, he's bolstered, sorry, can't do it. There's nothing saying that you can't keep trying, and you can past like level 3. Super relevant. Next up is a spell I've never really agreed with the flavor on, whether you're milking a pizza slice over the board or just taking your sweaty nerd friend from your local game store and rubbing his back against the board. Ooh, I'll gross myself out there. But we all know that guy, right? Grease. Arcane casters and primal casters have access to this one. For 2 actions, you can target a area of 4 5-foot squares. Everything in that area, though in the rulebook it says acrobatics check, has been, remember, eroded to reflex save against the spell DC, otherwise they go prone. Of course, we can also grease an object. I don't think anyone ever really does, though. At least I've never seen that. Classically speaking, this is the low level. Point that at the ground, whoop, they fall over. And given that a lot of spells have been moved around in terms of level and what they do has been changed by just a lot, I like that I'm seeing this on the Druid's list. And we'll talk about why in a second. The fact that this targets your spell DC means that Grease will always be good from level 1 to level 20, as long as they're like in contact with the ground and have a bad reflex save. Just snap your fingers, they fall on their face. Of course, stepping can solve that, but that's also fine for a lot of parties, especially parties in a proficiency-based system with casters, because if you're stepping to not fall, that means especially like a bunch of, say, like elf druids or elf wizards can outrun you and shoot back. Though, of course, the prone condition does give a bonus against ranged attack. This is, again, what we're calling save or waste 101, because the bad guy now has to use his action to stand up or move much slower to crawl or move even slower to step, meaning they're doing what you want them to do rather than they're doing what they want to do. Oftentimes that can result in less damage being passed out, which, again, just like it used to be, is super great. Next up, it's spell level 2. Again, it's kind of a pretty relative theme that we're going to see pretty constantly. Available to the arcane and occult caster, the bard really is getting access to a lot of powerful staples here. At spell level 2, a spell that in my Kingmaker run I truly wish I could target my mastodons with for profit, Mirror Image. Mirror Image is also a spell that's seeing a pretty big buff, because Mirror Image is no longer roll a d4 plus 1, it's just 3 more images flat out dropped onto you. This spell might not necessarily be as good for the control caster unless the control caster's back is against a wall or they need to go shields up really quickly. But you'll be amazed how many times things will attack into Mirror Image and have to destroy every single solitary Mirror Image before they get to you. Literally in Hail the Gorilla King, remember that one? Way back in the day when we did that tournament, I saw a man put Mirror Image on himself, then get hit with something that paralyzed him, and even on the ground, unable to act, it took the other characters he was fighting against cutting through every single last mirror image before they could find him. Even if that just bought you a round, that's an extra round, and truly it might be, given the fact that someone could strike in theory and hit all 3 images. That's a round of 3 wasted actions, which again continues to sell the save or waste meta, especially if we've made our wizard a fighter-wizard archetype kind of thing to play that Magus/Eldritch Knight kind of guy. Same is true with melee bards. And speaking of save or waste, one of the classic spells that casters like this would cast has seen quite a bit of change in such a way that it becomes a lot more playable, available to everyone, except for the primal casters. Summon Monster, the primals of course have Summon Nature's Ally, no longer takes that full round. You no longer have to waste a turn, hope you don't get shot, and then concentration check or lose the spell to summon an extra thing on the board. Now granted, that extra thing is summoned, which means it's only ever got 2 actions, and it can't use reactions, but its actions happen literally after you finish casting that spell. Basically, in old school terms, a full round action, and then here comes whatever it is you need, wherever it is that you wanted it, with 2 actions. After that, of course, you have to concentrate on the spell, so you lose an action, in theory, but 3 minus 1 plus 2 is a net of 1 at 4 actions. And there's nothing saying you couldn't summon Monster 3 times to lose 3 actions but have a total of 6 somewhere else. Again, this is another spell your rogues are going to love you for because you can make things flat-footed really quickly, considering, again, the spell happens on your turn by putting even just a dog behind the bad guy with the rogue on the other side. Suddenly the sneak attack is enabled, and again, the rogue is able to do their job more effectively, killing the bad guys, and it's all because of you. I never played summon spells before, because oftentimes I would see them just immediately die to scary boss monsters, but the fact that, again, it doesn't lock me down for a turn, it's kind of the reverse fixing of save or suck. 4 degrees of success prevents us from being locked out of combats really fast, and making the summon monster spells a little faster. Also, helps us get back in the action, especially if we're quick and would like to stride after, or would like to fire our bow if we're playing some kind of, again, gishy kind of character. Now, honorable mention, we won't talk about these spells a lot, but the wall spells will always be good. Wall of Fire, Wall of Force, Wall of Ice, Wall of Stone, Wall of Thorns, and Wall of Wind all exist in the Pathfinder playtest, and anything that, assuming in-person game, please don't do this to your computer monitors, guys, it'll be bad, lets you pick up the GM Sharpie and draw terrain on the board will always be really good. Whether that's locking monsters out, I've often used it to just protect NPCs real quick. When we're escorting them back to a besieged city, just throw a wall of ice around them while we deal with the hordes. Super good, not going to touch on them for a whole lot right now. But there are 2 spells that I feel like have just kind of been replaced by a greater one in the Pathfinder playtest. Those spells are Entangle and Web. I had to learn about this the hard way, because back in the day, Entangle was a really powerful spell, staple for druids. The entangled condition back in the day caused a creature to move at half speed, prevented running or charging, and put a huge penalty on dexterity and attack rolls, which made it a lot easier to attack things, would slow things down, and there were bigger, scarier spells, the bigger brothers of Entangle that would do con damage, would set things on fire. The spells were just really powerful. At present, in the playtest, the Entangled condition makes somebody hampered 10, and it's a DC 5 flat check, or you lose manipulate actions, activities, free actions, or reactions, but there's no debuff to the stats. You're just slowed down a little until you get out of that condition. Though, of course, Entangle does have that. On a critical failure, they're immobilized for a round. Especially at low-level play, I think we will see that considerably less, and the normal success of Entangle just isn't that good. Web will do the same. It will entangle things, sometimes immobilize things, but on successes, creatures are clearing the web out as they move through it. That was not the case in 1E, though, of course, in the playtest, we lose the "this is flammable" bit at the end that would often burn things to death. It makes both the spells just kind of not as good at all. Fortunately, they have been replaced. This is, again, the reason why I'm really happy that the Druid has access, as well as, I guess I'm still not in the habit of saying the Primal Sorcerer as well, has access to Grease, because Grease just comes out better, and Entangle's just not looking so good right now. But what is, at spell level 6, available only to the Primal casters, it's Tangling Creepers for 3 actions, out to 500 feet in a 40-foot burst. Think of this as Entangle's bigger, much scarier brother, kind of on par with Black Tentacles. Any creature moving on the area affected is entangled at no save. There's no like, oh, unaffected wall, until it leaves the area. It's just a flat speed bump that no one has to save against. And while this thing's running, also it's running for an incredibly long 10 minutes, you can concentrate on the spell to have a vine lash out from any of those squares in a 40-foot burst, which is many. That vine has a 15-foot reach, makes a melee touch attack using your bonus, so don't ignore stuff. This is worded in such a way that you'll want to be strength-based to have this, so the Primal Druids that have gone wild, Druids Gone Wild, have definitely found their really powerful control spell. Nevertheless, if that attack succeeds, literally all it has to do is if the attack hits. There's no save, there's if I hit you with this. The vine pulls the target into the creepers, so back by several squares, and makes it immobile for a round or until it escapes, using your spell DC as the escape DC, whichever comes first. Nevertheless, that's what Entangle ought to be. Then that shuts off so many encounters, it's even better than Black Tentacles. This literally seems to be the new Black Tentacles to me, as this will reach out, grab someone, and move them, granted on your turn, But again, if you make several of these, you could concentrate 3 times and keep 3 people away from a party of all casters, all archers, wounded party members, etc., etc. Funnel them where you want them to be, and multiple squares with a 15-foot reach will allow you to do so. Position them in such a way that Fireball hurts them more. Remember, those spells are really good now. And a lot of it is no save. Tangling Creepers is looking to be one of the best spells in the playtest, though again, granted, I might have missed some. But for now, that's all we have about Control Magic in the Pathfinder playtest. What are you guys thinking about all this? Have we played Control Casters? Are they still rubber meets the road? And again, did I miss any spells? If so, throw them in the comments. I want to hear all about it. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. And be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss any of your Pathfinder 1st or 2nd edition content. The next episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit will go back to Legacy Pathfinder. And it's going to serve a double purpose. We are both building a kineticist and building the primer for how to play a class that's kind of confusing. Oh, also, it's going to be a void kineticist by request, and it drops next Saturday.